Right. Right, welcome everyone. What a great turnout the day after Product Tank was on, so thank you very much for coming along. We're SocialCode and this is SocialCode Times Product. I'm Colin and I'm one of our lead consultants here. Thank you. No one says that. So very quickly a bit about SocialCode. So SocialCode is Oscar's vehicle for holding tech talks and product talks for the local industry. The whole idea is that we get speakers in that will share knowledge. We encourage feedback from the audience and want you to kind of suggest topics for future events. It's meant to be very inclusive. Ultimately, the big thing that I hope that differentiates us from everything else out there is we try to foster community. We've got the pub afterwards. So here's me on the socials. If any of you want to connect with me afterwards, any product talk ideas that you'd like to see discussed, or even if you want to speak. But we're not here to see me, so we're going to crack on with our first speaker tonight, Lydia Hawthorne. She's come from C Prime. She'll talk about products and engineering. So, I'm not an actual at this.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hi guys, nice to see you all. It's okay, I've got quite a loud voice if you want me to just project. Is that better? It's fine. Everyone can hear me, right? Yeah, cool, we're good. So, there's differing priorities, there's conflicts around how to actually problem solve between product and engineering. They're very chalk and cheese in terms of disciplines, what we're looking for in the skill sets, the backgrounds that those individuals come from, the MO that you've been asked to look after. Product teams responsible for defining product roadmaps, features, engineering teams more interested in actually building it and making sure they can build it, and there's technical integrity. It's difficult, therefore, to align on that product vision. And then product teams are obviously going to be prioritizing new features, things that are going to really take their product to the next level, into the stratosphere, staying ahead of their competitors. Engineering teams more interested in technical stability, making sure it doesn't knock everything else over and that it doesn't create a load of additional overhead or complexity. Product teams, they might not always fully understand the technical complexities of features, and we'll come on to the pitfalls of that later on. But engineering teams also struggle sometimes to understand the business priorities and the conversations that are commercially happening behind the scenes. So there's a bit of a story time. I'm going to read this, which isn't usually my vibe, but I want to do it justice. So, The Blind Men and the Elephant, it's a fable of sorts from years and years and years back. It's not in the storybooks nowadays, but a group of blind men heard that a strange animal called an elephant had been brought to the town, but none of them were aware of its shape and form. Out of curiosity, they said, "We must inspect and know it by touch, of which we are capable. So they sought it out, and when they found it, they groped about it. No comments, thank you. The first person whose hand landed on the trunk said, "This is like a thick snake." For another whose hand reached its ear, it seemed like a kind of fan. As for another person whose hand was upon its leg, the elephant is a pillar like a tree trunk. The blind man who placed his hand upon its side and said to the elephant, "It's a wall." Another felt its tail, described it as a rope. The last felt its tusk, gating the elephant is that which is hard, smooth, and like a spear. And the idea behind this fable is to try and understand that our experience is limited by our perception. The piece of the puzzle that we see is unique. And this is why we end up finding clashes quite often between product and engineering, because the pieces of the puzzle that we own are so vastly different. So, what do we do about it? We lay down our weapons, first of all, and there'll be people saying, well, what are my weapons, right? In product and engineering, we're not weaponizing what we do. I beg to differ. So we all have them. Yeah, everyone has them. But first and foremost, once we understand what they are, make sure they're not the first thing that you reach for, because you'll be surprised at how often that's actually the reason that disagreements between product and engineering can escalate faster than you'd expected, and people who don't need to be involved have ended up getting involved. And there becomes this sort of perceived notion that product and engineering aren't getting along, even though really it's just started out as a discussion between two individuals. So I want somebody in the room to try and call out, what is engineering's weapon? What do they do that you hate as a person in product? Tech speak. Thank you, because this was my number one on my list. Throw a load of jargon at you, and it's kind of like playing Pokemon, right? And they're like, this is my superpower. Yeah! I'm going to throw a load of jargon at you, and then you're not going to understand what the hell I'm on about, and you can't challenge me because you don't have the context. Right? Anything else, engineering-wise, that they do that's weaponizing?
Not knowing everything up front. I don't know how it works. I need 17 investigations before I can tell you how to fix it.
Right? Perfect statement to make to go to the product owner. Oh, I don't actually really know what information you need from me. So I'm then going to have to go and spend a load of time trying to figure out what you need, but I don't know. So I'm inevitably going to be delayed in getting that answer that I need from you. Product then, right? There's more product people in the room. So what do you guys do yourselves? Or if there are engineers in the room, please shout. What do product do?
Data.
Huh?
Data.
Sorry, I really can't hear you.
Data.
Data, yeah? What they say, like, we've got data to support this, and no one ever sees the data or knows what the data is, right? Perfect. Anything else?
It's very simple.
Yeah? It's really easy. All you've got to do is, like, make it work faster. Oh, right, okay, fine, I'll go do that. So these are the sort of triggering conversations that we inevitably end up happening, and we don't really realize it because they're so enwrapped in what we do day to day. So before you find yourselves having conversations like this, I urge you, please put the weapon down and try and connect on something. If you are going to do this and you are going to try and work better with either product or engineering, vice versa, you have to say sorry. You have to forgive each other, right? And there needs to be a level playing field from which you are starting. So if anyone's ever watched the film, is it Best Friends with Ryan Reynolds? And forgiveness, it's more than saying sorry. And it's like this big old song about how it is more than saying sorry, right? We have to really forget what's gone in the past. If you're wanting to, and this is feeling familiar to you, and you really need to change something about it, you need to be ready to move on. You can't keep dredging up the past and making assumptions based on things that have happened previously. So fostering an environment where saying sorry is easy. We should be hearing sorry a lot. Oh, I'm really sorry I didn't get that over to you. Oh, yeah, you're right. I wasn't really clear the first time I asked. These are really subtle changes that we can make in the language that we choose, the way we involve ourselves with individuals, to show that it's not an environment where we have a blame culture. There should be zero tolerance of blame. Okay, we're all coming from a different position. We all have different drivers. Saying sorry and blaming others should not, happen alongside each other. So we want to model it. We want to be seeing it as often as frequently possible. And if there are any of you in the room that are on more of the delivery side of things, empowering teams, getting to transformation to be truly impactful, this is really important. And empathy, empathy, empathy. Back to the blind man story, right? There's some versions of the story where they're basically just hammering it into each other, just knocking each other out, angry that they're not agreeing. And empathy, empathy, empathy. What is this person seeing day to day? What are the pressures on them? Who is in their ear, expecting results and they're not getting them? Finding common ground. And I don't just mean like, oh, we like football, I like football. Oh yeah, no, I love wild swimming too. That's a really important part of getting to know your co-workers. But what does not divide us unites us. So even if the only thing you can agree on is that you don't agree, call it out. Clearly, guys, like we're not agreeing here. Like, what are we missing? Get curious, ask the question, put it on them as well. Like, I'm seeing this is not a fun experience for all of us here. And I want it to be. I want to come to work and not dread having a meeting with you. How do we get there? So connect sincerely whenever and however you can. So if you are having a tricky conversation with somebody in the moment, make sure that when you're going back and revisiting that later on, that you're connecting on a human level. God, yeah, I know, we're really at each other's throats, aren't we, when we're in those meetings with blah, blah, blah. Cool, yeah, but like, what do you do this weekend? Try and find the humanity in and amongst the disagreement. And really try hard to find the shared crusade. I've made this term up, please borrow it if you would like, but a shared crusade is where is that common ground towards what we're working on? Now, this might be really working on your user personas, right? So that within product, you love talking about the customer, make them so human that the engineers can't even ignore them, right? That engineer understands the user personas of your product inside and out as if they are part of the furniture. It might be metrics. It might be that you find a common metric in mind. And I'll give you a hint. It's very rarely metrics that come from the product design part or the software development part, or even testing. These are usually things that are happening out in live, in like the monitoring side of things, right? You want to make sure that the data from the monitoring, how's it behaving in the real world, how are customers interacting with it, that comes back into the teams too, so that they can really understand code I cut is having an impact. But that crossover can be tiny. It matters, so spend some time there. Talk, don't type. It's really easy to say that, standing here, but we're in a very virtual world now, and typing, on Slack, on Teams, try to change how teams propose information to each other. I'm not talking about the day-to-day communications, that's really important, but if you know that as a product team, you're about to talk about new information to the engineering team, find space to talk about it on a call, right? Because even talking and listening as an activity, it immediately humanizes you, much more so than just reams of text that are coming through to you on IM. You'll find empathy much easier to reach for when you are talking to somebody verbally rather than on text. And here's an idea, like if you are really wanting to generate new ideas, you're doing some ideathons or hackathon style stuff in your businesses, make the ideas anonymous. There might be something that an engineer is saying that might not be too popular amongst the people that they normally work with. If you anonymize the ideas, it can really strip away any of this pressure for it to look a certain way. Here's the big question though, do we actually even want to agree? I don't mean this in a way of like, I want to have an argument every day when I go to work, or I want to disagree with my co-workers. I want to talk about this as a mechanism, disagreement as a mechanism at getting you to better answers and better solutions. There's an amazing TED talk by Julia Darr, How to Disagree Productively and Find Common Ground. And this is really like my call out to you guys today, is to not try and completely abolish disagreement from your day-to-day working lives, but instead know how to better navigate it, manage it, and to do it in a way that's always productive. So, my first point, resistance for the win, right? So we're always so scared of disagreeing that actually it means we avoid discussing important issues. And it's kind of like in your relationship where, your other half, they keep putting the bowls in the sink and they're not clean and you're like, oh my God, I hate them for doing that. But you never actually say to them how much it bothers you. And when you do say it, you're like, why have you put the dishes in the sink again? They're immediately triggered because they're like, I'm being told off. I did something wrong. Rather than saying, listen, you've not done it for a while, but I just need you to know it really bothers me. when you put the dishes in the sink. It makes me feel like you don't care that I took time to make sure our kitchen is nice and tidy. That conversation versus the first one is so different in its dynamic, its sentiment, and the other person is in an entirely different position as well. So really, really try to think about healthy disagreement as opposed to just arguing. Debate always includes rebuttal. You're not debating because you don't expect anybody to come back at you with a really good point or because they're playing devil's advocate. It doesn't mean it needs to be rude, mean, toxic, right? I love this. Out of the hottest fires come the strongest steel, right? If we didn't have product and engineering, if they didn't exist, if they didn't have different drivers and sentiments about them, we probably wouldn't get to the right answer. So both are important. They both need to advocate for the different areas of the product that they represent, but we just want to make sure it's not turning into a bloodbath every time we have those conversations. So talk openly. At the start of a new product, at the start of a product journey, whatever it is you're working on, have that conversation. Like, guys, we're probably in for a tricky road ahead. It's not going to be fun all the time. I wish it was. But what are we going to do in those situations? Proactively have the conversation so that when it comes to it, you're much better equipped to navigate them. Make sure there's no war to be won. This is all about the idea that essentially, you're okay letting a battle here and there go if you're not ultimately working towards winning a war, okay? Product and engineering, you're not, or you shouldn't, be at war with each other. And it will allow individuals to let go of the battle a lot quicker if they know that and they feel that really deep down. So make sure you're separating ideas from identity. It can get quite personal, right? And that's really what triggers people, is feeling like you're attacking them personally, not just about an idea or something that's an extension of them. We're asking people to bring themselves to work, right? We ask them, bring some of yourself into what you do. Then don't expect them not to feel hurt when you tell them their idea was bad or that you don't agree with it. Approach your disagreements with the most objectivity that you can. So if that's coming up with some litmus testing, some stress test questions that everybody gets asked when a new idea comes up, it's exactly why we have definitions of ready. It's why we have definitions of done. It's to add objectivity into what can otherwise be a very subjective conversation. Be genuinely open to changing your mind. I don't think that many of us are, because we really rate ourselves, right, when we go into those conversations. I know I'm doing a great job. At least I'm trying. And so we don't want to think that, we think changing our mind is a weakness. Actually, it can be the most empowering thing. It can get you really curious. It can get you some really interesting places, because often changing your mind comes from hearing a perspective you're not used to hearing. Be willing to be wrong. It kind of ties into the whole blame culture thing. Try to avoid that as much as possible, but being willing to be wrong, modeling it, I was wrong. That's a really good point. I had never thought about it like that. Use that language as often as possible. And what will come from it is trust. Trust that the other people actually know what they're doing, because you've seen the fruits of that labor that you've gone through. So I just want to round off this amazing Powerpuff Girl quote, right? Being a Powerpuff Girl isn't about getting your way. It's about using your own unique abilities to help people and the world we all live in. It's exactly that. It's what is going to get you to the best possible place, because that's ultimately what you're all there to do. And we just want it to be fun, right? We want it to be the funnest journey you've ever been on in a workplace. And the more that we can do to get you there, the better. So yeah, I'd like to just welcome any questions, really. That's it. You could ask me now or later. Yeah, go.
What's the key attributes you've seen in organisations you've worked in where there's less of this? For me, it's definitely having a strong mission and product vision. Cascaded, but I was wondering if there's anything else you've seen.
Yeah. Number one, teams that actually include product owners or product managers. Quite often I'm still seeing clients of mine that don't have their product owners or product managers inside their Scrum teams. Really problematic. It means that there's just not a lot of visibility from both sides. companies that invest in the monitoring piece and making sure that that data that is happening in live is being fed back. And that's about quality of code. It's about quality of experience from the customer. It's not unique to just product or engineering. I think a lot of people think that maybe product are only really interested in what's happening with the customer after it's gone live, and that engineering are only interested as long as there's no bugs, that they'll chalk that up as a win. But also, businesses that have had, from when they grew, from when they were being smaller up to the scale that they're at now, they really tried to continue to foster the closeness that the teams had back in the day. So teams that are like companies that are nostalgic, that really appreciated what they had when they were small and nimble, and there was just a handful of them in a room, trying to hash out problems together, that managed to keep that I've noticed has really, really made the difference. Any others?
Next, about credibility.
Of course.
So where, as a product owner, you are subject to the decisions of the business that maybe don't always necessarily make sense or aren't easy to explain, and then you have to communicate that to the dev team, and maybe your credibility kind of with them takes a hit because they're kind of, last minute decisions. Well, why did you know that's not coming, or why did you propose this piece of work if it's just going to be pulled now? And how do you kind of keep your credibility as a product owner in those situations?
Two things. The first is like transparency, right? Oh, yawn, transparency. But genuinely, like, your job is not to always agree with the business, nor is it your job to tell the engineering team that you always agree with the business. So be transparent in a professional way. I'll just caveat that. But the other one is, it's not an easy job being a product manager, product owner, where your responsibility is to challenge the business back. I'm not saying you're always going to win. I'm not saying you're always going to be pleased with the outcome, but you need to be relentless. Your engineering team, more than anything, need to feel that you are always willing to advocate for their points of view. And that takes relentlessness, just willingness to challenge, willingness to present back your challenges in a professional, data-led way. And facilitating conversations as well, because it might be that you have a tech lead who really summarizes the tech problems and the challenges with the solution that their business is pushing really well. Showcase them, make them visible. And that's something that I think product owners and product managers don't necessarily go into the roles knowing that they need to do, but very quickly realize either they can't continue to do it and they can't be relentless enough, or they figure out that they're actually pretty good at it. Yeah. One more?
You mentioned as teams grow, products and engineering naturally grow apart.
Yeah.
Any tips to help remedy that?
Yeah, I do big planning events. So whether or not you're running like agile methodologies or not, make sure that there's time that they are actually all together and that they're talking about how they're going to approach problems. Don't make any assumptions that conversations are actually happening, because it's very rarely not. I think there's a quote that's like, the biggest challenge about communication is that the assumption that it's happened. And that's one of the big things, that people are so used to just working over a desk from somebody, there being two people they need to notify, that they'll assume by doing that the information has been dissipated enough. That's one, but yeah, those big events, getting people together, not just on a social, that's great too, don't get me wrong, but really getting them together to problem solve challenges that are being faced by your business right here, right now, is invaluable in my opinion, yeah. Any others? Do we have time for one more if there is one? Or we want to wrap up? No. One more if there is another question, but if not.
I've got a question. I've just got to say kudos for getting Mojo Jojo.
Yeah, I know. You'd be surprised how many Powerpuff Girl images there were for this. I'd hate to see my Google history, but yeah, cool. Thank you so much, guys.
Right, so our pizzas have not arrived yet, so I think we're going to skip the break and go straight on to the second talk, which is...
You say pizzas have not arrived yet?
Oh, they are here.
Oh,
they're
they're
here.
just being hidden.
Right, there we are then. Right, well, we'll stick to the break then. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed pizza and more drinks. How good was Lydia? Brilliant. I've never seen a speaker sing before. We're going to go down the karaoke club later on, aren't we? Yeah, later. Right, without further ado, it's Tim Potte, who's Senior Product Manager at Ultimate Performance. So, Tim, over to you.
Hi, everyone. So I was initially going to kick this off by leading with quite a loaded statement like the role of product management is broken. And then I was going to play quite a funny video, or at least a video that I find quite funny, of a day in the life of a product manager at Meta. But unfortunately, the sound isn't working, so you're just going to have to imagine that video as we go forward. But really, the video for me, I'm sure you've all seen these kind of day in the life videos that were doing the rounds a few months ago of different PMs and different roles. And really, they kind of, I don't know, they didn't sit really well with me because to a degree they kind of undermined and trivialized the role that product was playing in our industry. And they kind of were my favorite zero interest rate and low inflation phenomenon that came out at that time, really. And yeah, and really, so we're at a point where the role of most product roles have been relegated to purely delivering output. So within this context, the role of product becomes little more than backlog administrators or a type of facilitator who's kind of there just to get features designed and delivered. So really focusing on the outputs within a business. And that's resulted in PMs or product owner roles that are not doing or being trained to do the job that their organization really needs, which is to focus on the outcomes that the organization wants to actually achieve. And I really feel this has contributed to a degree of confusion and inconsistency within the role of product or the role of a modern product manager. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to do a bit of audience interaction, right? So we're going to do some icebreakers. We're going to do some show of hands, if this would work. There we go. Right, so assessing the role of modern PM within the people in the room. So put your hand up if you feel you spend most of your day doing what you would describe as project management. A few people in the back there. A few people, right, great. And then the next one, put your hand up if you feel you're consistently provided with roadmaps and prioritized features along with their deadlines within your business. Noticing a few people there, Juliana. And then from a role clarity perspective, right, put your hand up if you feel there's any confusion between your role and the product designer or any other roles really, like Scrum Master, anything like that, within your team. So show of hands. Oh, more people than that one. That's quite interesting. But really, kind of what this demonstrates to us is that, what it really demonstrates is that the role of product. We all have the role of a product manager, but we all experience it very differently in a lot of ways. And there's no one definition of a product manager. And different people in this room will all excel in different ways and have different kind of backgrounds and things like that. And so with that context, let's really get into the meat and bones of the talk. So I'm Tim Potter, and I'm a product manager. And I've recently joined Ultimate Performance, or UP as we call it, and I'm leading product strategy for client experience there at the moment. Previously, I was leading direct-to-consumer product at InPost, and that's a last mile and logistics company. And I've really built experience helping early stage and growth companies with product development and transformation. That's really where I've kind of built my niche in my career so far. You wouldn't find me at a Google or a Meta. It just wouldn't be my type of environment. And really I had to revise kind of the scope of my talk. So the scope of my talk is called Product-Led Growing Pains, which I thought was quite a nice pun at the time. But really, as I was kind of going through developing the talk, our industry had been hit and faced with some economic shifts, which you're probably all quite aware of and probably been impacted by in some way or another. And so I've had to redefine the growing pains context of the talk. More about product adapting to new economic challenges and opportunities within the market. So before we get into it, I have to talk about UP. So show of hands, right? Again, I love doing this, by the way. I love making you have to interact with me in some way. But show of hands, right? Before this, who has ever heard of Ultimate Performance before? I know there's one person I spoke to who definitely has. You work there. But before I joined the business, I hadn't really. But I met up with the product director at the time, and he kind of showed me the opportunity. And it really was an interesting opportunity as a business. It's a profitable growth stage company that's currently undergoing a digital transformation. And really, UP, we're about three things. We're a personal training company in the health and fitness space. We have 21 gyms and over 300 personal trainers around the world. And our core product is selling life-changing transformation and results. It's as simple as that, really. And it is probably the best personal training experience I've had. And I'm not saying that because I specifically am contractually obliged to. I got to experience the product and use the product firsthand. So I went to a training session in our Cheshire gym. Now I would consider myself to be a fit person. And so I went in there quite confident. Some might say quite arrogantly so. I saw my arse, to be honest. It was a horrible experience, but it really showed me the quality of the training that we do and the kind of the transformations that we can provide people. So that's just a quick overview of UP, and we've got to get into the meat and bones of the talk. So product-led growing pains. I really want to focus on moving from the different types of product managers, right? So there's product managers who may learn and get their experience from working in larger scale organizations, and there's also types of product managers who will probably learn and gain experience working in startups or more growth stage businesses. And really, the two profiles from my experience could not be more different from an industry perspective. And going from a product position at a tech company with a reasonably modern engineering culture to a product position at a more traditional growth stage early company is extremely challenging. And for our industry, the last few years has been really good, right? Every business has had a lot of investment, and we could operate, with the resources of much larger organizations. And this is probably the environment that a lot of PMs and a lot of kind of product owners will have kind of gained experience in and trained in over the last few years. But from my personal experience, this really hasn't equipped the majority for the unique challenges of a real startup. Or even a growth stage company in some cases. And I see this in a lot of PMs that we interview. So early on at Impost, we were building and hiring the product team. And as part of that process, we had a step. And in that step, we asked the candidate to complete a task. We asked them to solve a simple real world problem with a brief that was quite open to interpretation. And what we found is the majority of PMs approached the problem like they worked at a Google. With infinite resources and infinite time to go and tackle that problem. And the most common response we got back was something along the lines of this: I can't begin to think of solutions until I see all the data and I talk to all the customers. What a luxury they have, right? And then what they do is the candidate would then proceed to outline a framework for how they would actually go and approach researching the problem. But in doing that, very few candidates actually addressed the problem in any sort of meaningful way and provided any value to the situation. And we even flipped the question. We said, right, you don't have the data. You can't talk to customers. Make a decision. What would you do? And the majority couldn't really answer that. And really, when there is any sort of uncertainty in a problem or solution, I find, as by default now, the PM role, we've been trained to fall back into research by default, which is problematic in some cases, especially in an environment where you're kind of required to make decisions very quickly with limited data and limited information. Now, at the same time, I just want to make sure everyone's aware, I'm not advocating against research or frameworks, by the way. I think these are very valuable tools, but they're just that, just as this is a tool for me to change the slide, they're tools that should be used when relevant. Research in an organization, especially in a startup or a growth stage company, should be applied to problems that have a high degree of uncertainty in high leverage areas, right? Research is a finite resource and we don't want to overuse it on something like a login page. I think I might have skipped ahead on a slide, but yeah, just grab myself here. And so what I would argue, this is it actually, I've skipped ahead, sorry. I'd argue that this over-reliance on research, reliance on tools, let's say, limits our ability to be creative and intuitive on problems. So in a true early stage or growth stage business as a PM, you don't have the luxury or you don't have the resource and the time required to do all this. You have, as I said, you have to make decisions. You have to make a lot of them under uncertainty, which is quite a challenging skill set to develop as a PM, right? And then kind of it aligns as well to the fact that, the landscape that we work in has changed over the last few months even. A lot of businesses no longer have access to the same level of investment and resources that they once had. And with that, the value the PM brings to that type of organization needs to change, or has changed already in a lot of ways. And so within that environment, from experience as well, shipping product is the best and most efficient way to learn, test, and validate. And it's also, from an efficiency perspective, it's the cheapest way to learn something, right? But most organizations who are in that phase are by nature inefficient. Big problem, right? And they culturally resist change at that level. And one thing I found is a lot of organizations at that stage will kind of fall back to phrases like, this is how we've always done it. And I really feel that's a phrase we should probably have banned worldwide. So again, engagement again, right? I'm going to outline 2 teams for you. And really what I want you to do is I want you to outline which team you prefer to work in, right? So we have the concept of team 1, and culturally, they position themselves as a team that the business folks tell them what to do. It's not their job to decide what they work on, but it is their job to deliver it. Then you have team 2, night and day. They work with the business to help decide what to do. Their job is to ensure they work on the right things for the business and drive the right outcomes. So really, just a quick show of hands to see what company I'm keeping. Which team do you think you would rather be part of if you're in this organization? Team 1 or team 2? So team 1? Absolutely nobody. Great. Team 2? Be surprised if nobody put their hand up. There's no team 3. But really, the problem you have is most of the teams are going to be team 1, right? Most teams you encounter are going to be in team 1, and culturally, the mindset of team 1 tends to extend across the whole organization in a lot of ways, right? And it results in silos, and it results in lack of communication. And one of the worst things I've noticed it results in is this idea of like responsibility ping pong. Whose sign off is it anyway? Trying to get things over the line in these organizations is horrible, right? And the problem it drives is it limits your ability as a product manager to ship things, and it limits your ability to learn, and it limits your team's ability to be empowered and to learn and to drive value in that business, right? So, and in contrast, like the team 2 that we've outlined here, they'll consistently deliver more value, they'll consistently be able to iterate faster, and they'll learn. And they'll be able to do that because they're empowered. They've removed the blockers. We've probably all read the book. I don't need to talk more about that in too much detail, right? But the problem we kind of face, right, is we all know we want to work in team 2, but when we join these kind of early stage organizations or more traditional businesses or even some startups, the value that team 2 provides to the business isn't always easy to measure. It should be there. Isn't always easy to measure with traditional output metrics. So, things like the number of PRs or the number of Jira tickets or, sprint cycles, etc. Don't really always show the value that team 2 will be providing within a business. So it can be very difficult. And unless you can align your company or you can align kind of the thinking in your business, the true value of the team should be judged on the outcomes they achieve without shifting. And without shifting that perception, product teams will kind of always be perceived as a cost of doing business rather than a key strategic enabler, right? And then, right, so to achieve any sort of meaningful change between what we're calling team 1 and team 2, most businesses will need to undergo a bit of a cultural shift across one or more of the following areas, right? And yeah, so really, this comes from my experience in helping early stage and growth companies transform and change the way they work, right? So usually most businesses will have one of these problems. Some businesses will have 3, sorry, UP. But really what we're trying to do is we're trying to transform the way the business thinks at an early stage and at a ground level to essentially drive meaningful change and drive product, right? So the first one we have is changing how you decide which problems to solve. So in a lot of businesses, right, this might shock you, but in a lot of businesses I work with, they don't actually have a clear product strategy in any sort of meaningful way. But when you arrive, there's no shortage of features or projects or things being worked on. And usually that results in a little more than really a depressing amount of wasted effort. There's a lot of waste in that process because you're working on a lot of things. They're not really aligned to a strategy, and we don't really know if they're delivering any value to the business. So wasted effort. And really that usually happens because of a lack of product leadership. And I really could describe it, and I've seen it in several organizations, as a kind of a vacuum that gets created by the absence of experienced PMs and starts to suck everything into it. And really kind of how you kind of can implement change in this space is to get good at continuous discovery. So building qualitative, quantitative ways for your teams to be able to understand, clients, to understand the market, and learn from the changes that they're making, and get really good at continuous discovery habits. And then also saying no. So as I said, when you arrive, there'll probably be like 100 things happening in the business, and we're all shipping all this stuff, and nobody really knows what's going on. Start saying no. And saying no is a skill. Not a lot of people are very good at saying no. And Steve Jobs has a really good quote from Apple, where he says he's really proud of Apple because they're an organization who are good at saying no to 100 good ideas, so that they can focus on one great idea. So really, how you decide to solve problems, continuous discovery, and really just prioritize on one or a handful of small key things and find the highest value thing to work on at any point. The next one is changing how you actually go and solve problems. So this kind of involves a shift from stakeholder-driven projects. And I don't know anybody here, do you currently work in a business where, as you say, you essentially just get given a roadmap of things to do? And if so, you work in a stakeholder-driven company. And really kind of the solution to this is to invest in cross-functional teams. So that idea of empowering teams to find solutions that satisfy both customer and business needs. And arguably, number 2 is probably the most challenging to put into practice because it represents the most political point on this kind of framework. And it really involves building trust and establishing a new relationship with your stakeholders and the business that's collaborative. So one of the issues I see a lot with product functions in a business is they aren't really seen as a strategic stakeholder. They're seen more in the delivery aspect, where product managers are more just focused or product owners are more just focused on the outputs. But really, fostering change in this kind of environment and changing how your business solves problems, product manager needs a seat at the table as a strategic stakeholder in everything that business does. And then the last one is changing the way you build and deploy. So again, you'd be surprised at how many companies I've worked with who essentially just do waterfall in sprints and then call themselves agile. It's a very fun process. Usually things go on for about 9 months and nothing gets delivered. They never ship anything and they never really learn anything, but they are agile, don't worry. We've got sprints, but to what end really? So really the question you need to ask when you kind of arrive in an environment like is why do we do this? And usually the business doesn't really have an answer for it. And personally, I'm a big fan of lean processes and lean manufacturing process. So when I begin working with a team, I purposely try and strip back process and ceremonies using a simple Kanban board, encourage asynchronous communication, and really just to demonstrate to the team, but also to the organization that you know what, you can actually move faster. And this approach really helps to highlight waste within that process. And you can really create buy-in and get your stakeholders on board. It's like, oh, we're shipping things really quickly now. What changed? Well, we removed all the unnecessary process from the situation and we're actually able to ship product and we're starting to learn new things and we're starting to drive value into the business. So again, changing how you deploy is a massive one. And as I said, not all businesses will have these 3 problems. Some will have symptoms, but some might have one. But really as an early stage PM or in a growth stage business, really your role is in driving change in these areas to enable product to function and to drive value in that business. I'm really just going to move on to conclusions. You can see I haven't really designed that slide very effectively. So actually, I used AI to design this presentation, by the way, because I'm extremely lazy. So work smarter, not harder. And it did a really good job, right? So what I actually haven't done is I've not really edited much of it. I kind of gave it a prompt and went through a few iterations of it. But I think it came out with it did a really good job. Probably better than I could, except for this last slide, which has annoyed me now, so I'm annoyed at the AI. But really, in conclusion, I think to start with, to try and tie all this together into a theme, I feel we're at a point where in our industry, kind of the good times have gone. A lot of businesses, whether they're large established companies or early stage growth stage companies, are facing growing pains in an unsure economy. And as PMs, we really need to adapt our approach so that we can continue to bring value to organizations. And as I said, there's quite a lot of product management roles which have kind of been, which are basically just facilitating, delivering features. And I really see the value that product can bring to an organization as something far beyond that, something far more strategic. And really, from our collective experience, it's just really the takeaway from the talk that I hope you can all take away today is that we should be addressing that as PMs because I think we're definitely undervaluing ourselves in a lot of ways, and that's me. I think that was 15 minutes. Roast me. Right, who's got some questions then? Anybody?
A lot of the talk you were talking about PMs and product managers. So what's the difference between a product manager, product owner, and a project manager?
It's very interesting.
For the purpose of the live stream, can you repeat the question?
You did tell me that. So just to repeat the question, it is what is the difference between a product manager, a product owner, and a project manager. And I think really, you highlight the kind of the thing I was trying to address as part of the talk. And I might not answer your question directly, but it's like we've created this real inconsistency and confusion of what the role of product is within an organization. And even the fact that we've got product owners and product managers, you know, to me feels just unnecessary and confusing. And I almost feel like a product manager is pretty self-explanatory. It's somebody who can manage kind of a complex work stream across a business that involves multiple parties from beginning to end. And they follow processes like Prince2 and Gantt charts and all these boring things, right? Sorry, project managers, to kind of get there, right? A product owner traditionally probably fits more into what a Scrum Master would be doing with teams. And they really kind of embed themselves as the business person in the team, but they also kind of take on a bit of a role of delivery in some ways. And then a product manager, a product manager should be seen as more strategic, looking at, you know, the commercials of a business, deciding on the product vision, defining the product strategy, and then starting implementing that with the teams. But I'm at a point from a kind of just experience perspective where I think a product person is a product manager and a product owner. And we shouldn't really encourage that disconnect that we currently have within the roles. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, so product owner is a hangover from Scrum.
Pretty much, and a lot of people have kind of migrated into that. And I think a lot of product owners, it's a great way to get experience in the role, because you're usually kind of segmented into a team or a certain area of the business, and you don't really have to think strategically in that sense. You're delivering. You're in that person who's kind of stakeholder led. The business is deciding what the team works on, and it's kind of your job to kind of facilitate that and deliver those features. And you can get great experience doing that. But it is kind of for me anyway, and you guys can tell me I'm wrong, but it is a hangover and a bit of a confusion from, you know, Scrum Master to, you know, how can we add kind of a business person into a cross-functional team? And I think that's where product owner kind of comes from in a lot of ways. And as I said, the takeaway for that question is we need to stop encouraging this disconnect. Product is a strategic person across the business. They wear many hats, which we're going to talk about later. And yeah, delivery and working with teams is one of the things a product manager does. And we shouldn't, you know, limit ourselves. Does that make sense? The back.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but just the Scrum Master role is very different to the PO role in Agile. I will say that.
Yep.
And the product manager position is really interesting because it's always meant to be the go-between between tech and the business. The product owner is meant to be more on the business side. The Scrum Master is there to make sure shit is happening. Pardon my French.
Literally.
But it really depends on like the scale of the business, right? Because if you're a small, nimble business, then like everyone's double jobbing, everyone's wearing multiple hats.
Yep.
One thing I wanted to pick up on was, you know, you talked about that you should be measured more on your outcomes. I'm really keen to know what data or like what metrics like feasibly are possible in order to measure that. Because otherwise, or should I just say, how are you presenting your wins in that space?
Yeah.
Even if it's not a specific metric, someone's asking, like, how do I know you've done a good job?
That's exactly it, right? And kind of as I touched on in the talk, it's not as easy to present outcomes and the value that outcomes provide to an organization as it is to present outputs, right? And yeah, I completely agree with you. I think the whole kind of premise of the talk was about the confusion that exists in all these different roles and what all the different inconsistencies and different experiences we all have as product managers. And I think even that question just highlights, you know, the differences of, you know, a startup or a more scale business and how product functions in it. And I think really from the kind of metrics perspective for outcomes, I think I'm going to be really boring and give a safe answer in the sense of OKRs, everyone's favorite terminology. Actually work really, really well in showing outcomes and showing the business back. And really, one of the things I did mean to speak on as part of the process was, the speech was actually OKRs, and really how, you know, when you're deciding on what problems to solve, actually implementing OKRs properly and figuring out what the measures of the thing you're trying to move. So if we increase this by 25%, that will kind of ladder up to our kind of North Star or objective or our goal. as part of that. So I would say one of the best ways to do it is implement OKRs. But I've seen OKRs done in a lot of different ways, and mostly terribly, because a lot of businesses, again, don't know how to do it, and they really have to kind of be trained to it. And when you're in a business where you kind of join and everyone's working on like 100 things at once and loads of stuff for shipping and nobody really knows what's going on, when you try and implement OKRs into that, it's an absolute mess. So really, you have to get the prioritization piece down first, then define the OKRs, which are the measures of the outputs that the teams will kind of impact on, and then that will show the value back to the business. And there's lots of ways we've done it. I think at Impost we had every quarter, the teams were responsible for presenting those OKRs back to the business and what they've achieved and to get feedback and guidance. And that is one way of measuring outcomes instead of outputs. Hopefully that answered the question. Any more questions? You had your hand up before.
Thank you. Yes, just now there's a slide saying that the research and the framework has actually limited for the creativity. So, but sometimes people will just run out of creativity. So, how would you suggest to product manager to boost their own creativity?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. I think you kind of have to build a product sense. And yeah, I probably need to think about this question a bit more, actually. But I think really, from a creativity perspective, you need to build product sense so that you're able to kind of understand and make decisions quickly with less and less, information that's available to you. I know it's probably kind of a really weak answer in that, and actually I'll probably need to take a bit of time to think about that one, to be honest. That's a really good question, and faced with 100 people looking at me, I can't really provide a strong answer to that one. But yeah, really good question, and I'll have a little think and I'll be able to follow up on that. Okay. Any more questions?
Did you say you're not a fan of research and frameworks?
So I'm not a fan of it. I just think we have overutilized research frameworks in a lot of ways. I think we exist in kind of an industry where the majority of problems have already probably been solved in a lot of ways. So, if you're dealing with something that's quite a common problem in tech or in an app or in some sort of tech product, I think a lot of businesses like, fan companies, etc., have kind of already solved those problems. They might not have done like an amazing job, but they've already solved it. So we exist in an industry where, yeah, majority of stuff has already been solved, and really, I am a big fan of research, and I love research, but you really need to there's a point in time to do research, and it's really when you've got really complex problems that are really domain specific and you don't understand the answers to them, and that's when you should really kind of invest in research and the cost that comes with it. So the thing about research and kind of frameworks and tools, etc., is not that I don't like them, they're really valuable, but I think it's more the overuse that we've kind of developed and the kind of reliance we've developed on those tools as product managers or product faculty over time. And really, the talk is really about kind of addressing that, because what you find is you find a lot of PMs who come into the role or have done the role for several years, let's say, at like a larger scale company where they had access to everything. They had data analysts and they had research teams and all this stuff that they could lean on and pull on to kind of really get into these problems. When they're asked to get into a more strategic environment like a startup where, again, they're responsible for making decisions quickly and driving value in that business, they can't really do it. So the two things are kind of odds at each other. And I think we've created a bit of an over-reliance on research and tools and frameworks. Depends what you're trying to do. Again, really good question, right? I love BAs. I was a BA at one point in my career. Juliana's there. She's a BA in the company she's worked for. But I'd say, again, it's like it depends on the type of company, right? Whether you need BAs or not. I think if you're an early stage company, and that's kind of where my experience is at the moment, you don't really need business analysts because you're not trying to define the process. But if you're in a business and you have a massive step change process or change that you need to make in that business, hire a BA. Yeah, don't hire a product manager to do that, hire a BA. And as I said, there's certain things that project managers as well, we've discussed project managers, will actually be better at than product managers. So it's about finding the right skill set for the right job. And if you've got a huge step change process or complicated business related change that you need to make, hire a BA. Very important for certain things. Loads of questions.
One more.
One more question then. Okay.
Can I just take you back to the
I like my little picture though.
So now, you have team 1 who practically told what to do, and you have team 2 who works with the organization to decide what should be done, right?
Yep.
Now, how would you advise team 2 to manage a situation where they identified a task or project they should get into to move the organization forward, but the expected outcome was negative, like
Yeah.
it went down south, they didn't get the expected outcome. Maybe they ran into a loss.
Yeah.
Or went into that venture.
I would say, to a degree, right, 50% of the things you're going to do in product, or at least in an early stage product where you're trying to maybe develop product market fit, or you're trying to, you're trying to move a metric. Honestly, like 50% of the things the teams will do will probably not work as intended. And that's okay, because that's a cost of building product development. If you're constantly losing, then yeah, okay, that's a problem that needs to be addressed. More from like, a leadership perspective in that sense. But yeah, I think a lot of the times the things that I coach businesses and teams with is it's okay to fail. It's okay to do the wrong thing, as long as you've learned something from doing that, and then you understand, right, how can I then iterate on that? The Irish accent came out there, iterate on that one. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's fine for teams. But yeah, as long as you're not like losing 100% of the time on everything you do, then yeah, cool. Make mistakes, fail. And then honestly, the team and the business is going to learn more from the mistakes than they will from the successes. So, encourage the teams to, to try things. Cool. That's it. That was exhausting. Bye.
My mic's not turning on at the moment, but we're going to hang around straight to our next speaker, which is going to be Lauren Gibson. She works for the Tote. Yeah.
How does this work? This is fancy, isn't it? Oh, okay. I have no idea. Right.
Perfect. Just clip it onto that.
There we go. Hello. Yes, so that's me. So we'll just move past this slide because that's just my picture. So yes, so today I will be talking about pathways into product for people from non-technical and non-digital backgrounds.
I think you need to go the other way, it's upside down.
There we go. Okie doke. So a little bit about me before we get into it. This slide is really just an excuse for me to show off my super cute dog. So product manager at the UK Tote Group. I've been in product now for 8 years, which when I say that, I don't believe it because in my head I am still definitely 24. As well as being busy with my day-to-day role, I'm also a volunteer on the organising board for the Manchester Tech Festival. Won't talk to you too much about that, but if you want to know more about it, come and grab myself or my lovely colleagues after this, and we'll tell you what it is. But it's a week-long of events for you guys at the end of October. Come to it, it's great. I'm also a woman in tech. So for the past 8 years, I've either been the only female on my team or one of the only women in meetings, and I'm quite aware of how that's impacted my career and what that's meant for my career. So earlier this year, we launched Women at Tote, something I'm very proud of, and it's just a networking community for female employees and male employees at Tote, just to sort of highlight the issues that women face day to day in the workplace. And if I'm not busy enough, I'm also a full-time stepmom to 2 teenage girls, because teenagers are fun, right? So they keep me on my toes, and they make me feel really uncool. I'm also a dog mum to that little fluff ball there, Bailey. I think we're on the 6th visit to the vets in the past 12 weeks or something like that, so he definitely keeps me on my toes. And then last but not least, something that I am so proud of and I tell everybody this. I'm a council estate kid. Thank you. And you will find out why I'm proud of that on the next slide, actually. So that's enough about me, so let's talk about where I started. So imagine that the DeLorean is real, and if you don't know what the DeLorean is, first of all, you are forgiven, but please do go and watch. Please do go and watch Back to the Future. It's an education, and also it's a time-traveling car. So we're going to step into the DeLorean, and we're going to go back to 2013. I had an epic side fringe, but what I thought at the time was a less than epic job. I was a customer service advisor for Virgin Media. Didn't really know what I was going to do with my life, with my career, and where I was going. So thanks to ChatGPT, the role of customer service advisor is to listen to customer inquiries, complaints or issues, and respond in a helpful and courteous manner, which I did 90% of the time. If you've worked in customer service before, you will know that is like the tip of the iceberg. You've got to do all that whilst maintaining like a good call time, how long you're on the bloody toilet for, how long you're typing up notes for, also whilst Mrs. Smith is screaming at you because a courier company may have thrown her phone parcel over the fence, which then landed on a micro dog and killed a micro dog. That was the most awkward call of my life. So it's not just that, right? But I'd like to think I was quite good at my job, or I must have been quite good at my job, because I got asked, or was seconded onto a project. So at the time, we were about to embark on a massive project to replace all the internal systems that customer service agents used. So I was asked to step up for a couple of months initially to sort of just give my thoughts, my feedback on some processes and help design new business processes. So I don't know if you've ever tried to transfer your mobile phone number from one provider to another network provider. It used to be, I've not done it before, but it used to be a right pain in the bum. So that was kind of my role on the project, was to, just give my input on those business processes. But from my days in customer care and customer service advisor, I did learn how to handle difficult conversations, because trust me, when you've got Mrs. Smith crying to you down the phone because her dog is dead, and you can't, you've got to put through you've got to put her through to the complaints team, and the hold music for the complaints team is time to say goodbye. You can't, okay? So you've got how to handle those difficult conversations. Also, doing that, and then balancing your call time and making sure that your call time for the month isn't too long and you're not going to get your ass kicked from your boss in your one-to-one. Balance. And lastly, so I mentioned that my time on the project should have only been for a couple of months. It ended up being a couple of years, because actually what I started to find was this was a great opportunity on the project to make things better, not selfishly, not just for customers, but also for customer service advisors, because customer service advisor job is well boring. So it's making it better for everybody. And actually what I found was people actually liked my ideas and liked what I was saying. Now at the time I was in my early 20s, so for this CEO of Liberty Global to say, yeah, that's a really great idea what you've just had, let's do that. That was massive. For a council estate kid, that is fucking massive, right? Okay, so I kind of learned that I also had a voice. So yeah, a couple of months turned into a couple of years. I only took the project, to be honest, because it was 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. It wasn't 2 till 10, Tuesday to Saturday. But yeah, ended up having a bit of a ball. It was great fun. And yeah, just sort of found something that I loved, so much so that I took a bit of a leap of faith. So the secondment came to an end. And they worked to put me back on the phones, and I was like, yeah, don't think so. So I took a bit of a leap of faith and left. I don't recommend this. Left Virgin without a job to go to. Scariest time of my life. or one of them. But yeah, left Virgin to find a job that I liked because I just didn't want to go back on the phones. So we're going to hop back in the DeLorean now, and we're going to go to 2015. So yeah, I had a few months off. Great Christmas, to be honest. Yeah, I had a nice few months off. 2015. My official title was implementation consultant, but it was also project manager and product manager. So it's for a small fintech in Wilmslow called Mutual Vision. I say small, they were a small company, but they had like half of the market for what they did. And at the time, they were no more than 40 people, and they were mostly engineers. So yeah, I had to wear every hat conceivable, apart from finance and HR. HR would make sense if you know me. So yeah, so again, I asked ChatGPT what are the common skills. So include confidence and communication to motivate and inspire teams, and to be able to solve problems. So decided I was quite good at communicating, based on, yeah, Mrs. Smith and that awful call. But then this job was a massive learning curve for me. It was a really steep learning curve for me. It was the first time that I had to interact daily with technical teams, with engineers. I very quickly learnt what happens when there's ambiguity in requirements. You don't necessarily get what you want at the end of it. That was an interesting conversation with the CEO. But with this, and because of how steep a learning curve it was, the importance of a supportive boss and organisation. So when I joined Mutual Vision, my boss knew at that point that I wasn't the finished article, that I had potential, but there was going to have to be a lot of work on their part as well to get me there, to give me the time, the patience and the support. And then actually sort of after a couple of years, it was really weird how this happened, but after a couple of years I said to my boss, I was like, look Craig, I need to sit down with you on Monday morning, I've got something to tell you, or I want to talk to you about something. And he was like, yeah, sure. I was thinking about the same thing anyway, and I was like, I'm saying about the same thing, you can't read my mind. And we both said in different ways that we felt like it was time that I'd reached what I could do at Mutual Vision. There wasn't much further that I could progress. Like I said, it was a small company. And unless I was going to take Craig's role, which I absolutely wasn't at that point, it was time for me to move on. And his support and me being able to have that open and honest conversation, and him also being able to recognise that at the same time, gave me such a confidence boost. I was just like, oh my God, okay. I'll hop back into the DeLorean and we're gonna go to 2018. So this was like my first proper product manager role where I could put product manager on my CV. I'm not gonna read what we actually do because I'm in a room of product people, so I'd like to hope that we all know what we do. So 2018, yeah, moved to a company called Fanatics in Manchester. At the time, they were like big. They were one of like the go-to places you wanted to work. They were up there with like booking and stuff like that. And it was like an 80-strong engineering team. And I went in on like day one, and there was like fancy offices and like free beer all the time. It was great. And I went in day one, and I was petrified because I was like in awe of all of these people, right? And I just thought, oh my God, they're gonna think I'm properly rubbish at my job. They're gonna think like, what the hell is this girl doing here? And I was really, oh God, it was awful. The first 3 weeks I was a mess. But quite quickly I realised that you will never stop learning. You will always go to somewhere and learn something new. That is just part of life. You're never going to be the finished product. But also just like everyone else, right? So the head of engineering at Fanatics, who I have on good authorities, never stops learning. He never stops learning. The CTO, they never stop learning. They always they will speak to somebody in their day-to-day role and learn something new. So that was like, okay, right, I'm not a complete fraud. So you don't need to be technical. I am not a technical product manager in any way, shape or form, right? That product manager and technical product manager, very different roles. But I learned you don't need to be technical. You just need to understand technical concepts, and you need to be able to communicate those to business stakeholders. You are essentially the glue between engineering, between technology, between business and whoever else. The last one, back up, you got instincts with data. So at Mutual Vision, we only had a couple of products, and like I said, really small company and really friendly customers as well. So I could say to one of my customers, all right, Alan, we're trying to build a form here, and there's like 50 questions that you can select from this form. Company the size of Fanatics, you cannot do that. You have to be able to back up your gut instinct with some kind of data. You don't be planning weeks and weeks ahead and all that kind of stuff, but just say, look, this is what I think. Here's some loose data why I think we should be doing it. So that's what I learned at Fanatics in 2018. So we move to today. So we've turned the DeLorean off, it's back in the garage. Okay, so I am currently product manager for UK Tote Group. Started there 2.5 for marketing, gaming and customer care. Struggle to remember that, that's quite worrying. So for three areas, contributed to year-on-year improvements across B2C mostly. And in the sort of spirit of continuous learning, what am I still learning today? So I'm going to jig the order around a bit. Find a mentor. So recently, this is something that I've been doing in the past year. I've got a couple of mentors, one within Tote, UK Tote Group who doesn't work in product, and one outside of the organisation. The value of having somebody who looks at things in a different perspective and a different lens cannot be underestimated, especially if you're sort of trying to, how valuable it is in your career. There's more soft skills needed in product management than technical skills. There are some days where I feel like I could be a counsellor, because I just feel like all I do is say, right, okay, well, that's a really great point, person in marketing, and I'd love to give you like a flying pig across the screen or something, but let's think about this because there's some technical limitations here. Yeah, there are some days that's all I feel like I do. There are more soft skills. You do not need those technical skills in product management, or you do need them, but there are more soft skills needed in product management than technical skills. Everywhere does product differently. Like, there are different product managers with BAs. You will have some places that just have product owners. They do it differently, but like delivery methodologies, they will do it the best way for their business. Not everywhere is going to be product-led, as I have learned. There are going to be times where you are stakeholder-led, and you unfortunately do just have to sort of, you're not a feature factory, but you're not product-led, but everywhere does it differently. So some key takeouts. So I've broken this into 2 areas. So firstly, key takeouts for people who may be in this position who aren't from a technical background. There's really not a defined path into, but he's been invaluable to my career, and he will continue to be invaluable to my career. So find your cheerleaders and hold on to them, even if you annoy them. Just ignore that bit. I went to a recruiter and I said, I would recommend Colin. I would recommend Colin. I went to a recruiter that I know, and I know she's good, and I just said, look, could you? So how do I work around the?
So if you have an idea, you say.
Just sort of day-to-day, right, natural part of it. If it does then sort of circle back that actually your idea was great and it was going to help, then don't be afraid to say, well, I had that idea in the first place. Like, don't say, well, I told you so. But do say, look, I had that idea in the first place. Like, how can we implement it? What can we do? That's what I'd say to that.
I'd chip in on that myself, because having ideas is unilateral to any business, isn't it? And if you're in an environment where culturally you don't feel like your ideas are being listened to or they're being shot down, you're not in the right environment.
Yeah.
You've not got great leadership that encourage ideas, so leave.
And Colin's got lots of jobs.
Seen through me.
Usually they will say they'll usually say let's put it to phase 2. Phase 2 never comes. And
Yeah.
that's the problem.
Phase 2 is like a backlog that just sits there, isn't it? It's like phase 2. Yeah. Yeah. If they're not gonna, Colin's idea, just go. If they're not gonna listen to your ideas.
I'm sending out my resignation.
There you go, Colin.
I was going to say, so just kind of on the point, the other things too, it wasn't the right idea at that time, and it is, ask why. Yeah, because it might not have been the right idea at that time, and then all of a sudden they adopt it and it is the right thing. Something's changed. Well, hopefully something external has changed. But try and understand what that was.
But sometimes the hippo, if you can make them think it was their idea, you can have no problem with like buying from the stakeholders being on top of the business. So
I wish I could be like that, but I'd just be like, oh, that was my idea.
I've got questions. Right, well, thank you very much to Lauren. Right, everyone, big thanks to Lauren. I actually wanted Lauren to speak. I went to her because we spoke about her doing this chat a few years back. So thanks very much for doing that, Lauren. I know it wasn't easy, but yeah. Right, last refreshment break, everyone, and then we'll on to our final talk. So get your drinks in, get your bathroom breaks in. There's a bathroom downstairs as well, if people want to nip downstairs.
hats we have to wear. Well, there you go. I already said that bit. So who am I? Why am I here chatting to you on a Thursday night in Manchester about hats and product? Well, I'm currently a senior product manager at a company called Egress. That's a cybersecurity company based in Sheffield and London. So really what I'm doing is traditional product management, actual product management, you know, genuine product management stuff, which is great. You know, helping people not, you know, click on phishing emails and not, you know, doing data breaches and all that really, really fun stuff. I'm passionate about quite a few things. I'm a bit of a product nerd. I love working with teams to solve problems. It's really cheesy and really corny, but it's true. So why wouldn't I put that here, talking to product and engineering people? I also love product management. I've said product quite a lot already, but I love product. I love the discipline. I love trying to understand why is it challenging? Why is it so rewarding sometimes? Why is it frustrating? I've got a couple of ex-colleagues here who will definitely have seen me pulling what's left of my hair out, you know, in my day-to-day job. But that's sort of why it's fascinating. And I'm also really into craft work, but I probably won't talk to you about that if anyone wants to know about the Trans-Europe Express and where it stacks up in craftwork albums, then, you know, good luck to you. We'll have a drink later. So trying to tie into some of the themes of the evening, I'll start off talking about my route into the industry. And I don't want to talk about my career too much, but it will come up because I've worked in real scrappy startups, founder-led organizations, scale-ups trying to sort of, you know, mix and match and blend their portfolio, and then more global companies. So we'll talk about my route in because I think it chimes with some of the subjects we talked about tonight. So I started off really just being a failed wordsmith. I did French at uni, and then I doubled down and did translation. And then I realized my dream of being a freelance linguist sort of fell flat on its backside quite soon. So I actually spent 2 years trying to do that, trying to flog that horse quite unsuccessfully. And then I moved into very specific sort of project delivery roles, but with a sort of language focus, which was cool. Does anyone remember the Motorola Razr? This is the only bit of engagement. Was it the best phone? The original one or the 2012 one that was the thinnest one ever?
The pink one.
Oh, I wasn't involved in that one, but you know. But, you know, it was a great phone, and especially the 2012 version that shipped into over 30 languages in 50 countries. You know, I was involved in that from a project delivery perspective. But why I've mentioned that is because that was where I first started to sort of get a handle on the software delivery life cycle. And as a project manager, I was sort of seeing these things like localization testing, you know, like I was working with engineers to ship products around the globe. I sort of enjoyed that. Definitely better than this bit of my career up here. So then I moved to a company called Zipcar in 2014. And basically I went from being an agency project person to a client-side project person. And that was great for me because I got to sort of learn loads of things around marketing, value proposition, operations, support, like PMO and strategy, words that I literally didn't know anything about, including product management. So at the time we were trying to launch the business in new territories and relaunch what we had in the US and the UK in different countries. And that's where I'm going to start today. So hats and what I've learned wearing them. You're going to hear me say hats quite a bit. So like I said, I moved to Zipcar in 2014. We were trying to launch new markets across the globe, but not just launch new markets, actually drop new products into those markets in multiple languages. Really exciting time for the business. And I moved from a delivery role into a traditional product manager role, or what I thought was a traditional product manager role, owning a global roadmap coordinated from our London office, which sounds really exciting, but it really just means trying to deliver as many things for different distinct markets with regulatory needs across the globe. Taiwan, Turkey, Brussels, they all have very different needs, very different users. But that was a great sort of learning curve for me. And like I said, we're having to join up the US and the rest of the world regions. So I just got into it because I enjoyed product and I wanted to ship things. So what sort of hats did I have to wear? Well, none of this is going to actually, let me hide that. None of this is going to talk about things like data analysis, tooling, how to speak to customers, stakeholder management, prioritization models. This isn't going to come up once. But what I'm going to talk about is the unconventional things I was expected to do as a product manager to be successful. So first, I had to become this expert collaborator, and you're probably all familiar with the concept of having to glue teams together. We had, I can't remember his name now, Jason Knight. joined our team meeting a couple of weeks ago for a fireside chat. And he said, oh, you know, describing product people as glue between other functions and other areas of the business really underplays what we do. And I agree with him, but I couldn't find a better phrase for what I was doing at the time. So I've left that in there. And then the other sort of job that I had really, the other hat that I was wearing was just this reliable builder. Just when someone says, go and build this new product, build this new feature, I'd just go away and do it. So we're not really talking about traditional product management. We're talking about somewhere between a gluer and a doer. Just thought of that, just off the cuff. So what did I learn, or how did I adapt to having to glue these teams together? And when I say different teams, I mean support, UX, strategy, fleet management people in different regions, in different countries. Well, I realized that I had to sort of curate a tribe. And basically, what I've done here is come up with a really fancy phrase that just means build a really strong network. But I had to do this in sort of two distinct areas. My sort of near hemisphere, my near sort of sphere of influence. And as a junior product manager, as an associate level product manager, I actually, and it sounds really obvious, but I think it chimes well with some of the topics today. I actually had to spend lots of time with existing product managers, people that worked at Yahoo, Google, lots of really smart folks from the US. So I actually spent hours and hours and hours, probably weeks, shadowing them, like observing them, taking notes of how they start sort of meetings, how they drive initiatives, like how do they actually start those conversations. They probably absolutely hated me, but I didn't care because I knew I didn't actually have the product sense or even the experience to do that myself. So my starting point was other product managers, learn off them, steal off them, be inspired by them. I'm not going to go through all of these things because there's lots of things here, but one of the team, a near sort of neighbor and collaborator that's really important was engineering, and obviously it was a big theme of a couple of the talks earlier. And I spent time with engineering, just understanding how they build things. I never actually had to write a spec down, put it in front of engineering leads and engineering managers, actually understand how the work got built. So I had to, you know, out of my own curiosity came up in some of the questions earlier, is just sit down and understand how they worked, call them, not Slack them, call them, speak to them, ask them, how do you build this back end? How does it interface with the mobile app? What is the difference between an iOS and an Android app? Like, why are we building these things? Actually invested a lot of time with engineering. And then sort of further afield, some of these teams in support, operations, they actually helped me learn how to craft a backlog. I just thought product was about building features, lists of features, one after another. But actually speaking with the support folks, many of whom ended up being really, really good and strong product managers, I understood some of the main customer pain points that I would never have been able to sort of identify myself. So I had a backlog of things there which I could go away and validate. And that was a sort of just general experience that I wouldn't have got without sitting with those teams. And operationally, I couldn't travel to all of the different operational teams that we were supporting. But there was a couple of times when I actually went out to Brussels and helped the team clean vehicles in the back end of the dodgy bits of Brussels, trying to clean our zip cars. And that made me realise that there was an opportunity here to just build operational efficiencies. So my backlog wasn't just features; it was stuff that helps the business, make money, not just make money and grow, but actually bottom line as well with things like operational work. So curate a tribe, or in real person speak, build a really strong network, starting with product and engineering, if in doubt. And then the other sort of role of this like go-to builder, the doer, I'm going to be relatively controversial here and say, don't obsess over methodology. I spent lots of my early career as a product manager wondering whether I was certified enough in Scrum and Agile and panicking about it because I thought everyone else was. And it didn't matter. It didn't help me at all. In the end, I got that stuff later, but it's just for vanity. And actually, my focus is just stakeholders and team. Who are they? Who can help me? Who can give me the shortcuts? What is the mission that we're trying to work towards? And this concept of constant learning and just shamelessly stealing. So I did quite a few things and shamelessly talking about shamelessly stealing, how meta. So that was my career at Zipcar. Lots of like gluing and doing, I guess, is a neat way to put it. So after that, I worked at a very similarly named company called Rockar Tech, which rather than being a global, I didn't even explain what Zipcar was, rather than being a sort of global company helping people get around cities and mobility car sharing company. Rockar was a very small, founder-led, sort of scrappy startup that had built an e-commerce journey that was aimed at big global car manufacturers to help them get cars from the factory into a sort of e-commerce journey in front of customers, in front of sort of B2C consumers, which sounds really easy, but it's very complex. There's all the stuff that goes on in the factories is bonkers really, with their data and where it's stored and how they get it. So in this role, I thought, right, I've got all these learnings of working in this global company. It will just translate one-to-one into my new role. It was actually a product owner role. And really, I couldn't have been further from the truth. There was a bit of doing here. I had to be a problem solver. But the get stuff done wasn't just initiatives. It wasn't just driving a roadmap. It could be anything. It could come from the founder. Fix this. Coach this person. There's an escalation from big car manufacturer. Get on the phone to them and tell them why there's a bug. I'm like, I never signed up for that. I never signed up for like explaining bad news to customers. But there's only 6 of us in product and engineering and UX. I can't say it's not my job. So there you go. I was a go-to problem solver by virtue of just being there. But then also sort of master facilitator, like rallying lots of different players to make our work. And by that I mean, or the context to that is, this business was trying to grow really quickly and they didn't know how they wanted to structure teams. So we had our in-house development teams that were quite young, so they were still in the forming stage. We had our offshore teams who'd built the product and historically knew all the context. We were playing around with like big management consultants from the big four agencies, and they were coming in and trying to advise us on how to build and how to grow and how to win new business. But actually, there wasn't just one of them, there was 2 of them. So we had these competing management consultants in the room trying to help us plan, do big planning. I was thinking, what's my role in this? I just want to write a story. I want to validate a story, right? So I had to lean into that. And actually, it was a great way to learn. I got quick results. I discovered things quickly, how the business runs, what the strengths and weaknesses are of our engineering teams. And actually started to build trust and credibility. All that pizza over there. So, I started to get some traction in this. I'd put a sort of word of warning against this, and my wife would testify. Lean in responsibly if that's possible. Just had to go and write a strategy, share it, and get everyone to buy into it. Great, that's what I want. And then also actually own the numbers, not just the product metrics, not just how many people have logged in and, all those sorts of things, but actually be the definitive owner of these sort of numbers on a bigger scale. So this is the move that I wanted, but actually it's come with a completely different set of hats, which I don't know if I'm ready for. So what did I learn about being a product strategist? They haven't been in touch. So regular collaboration, I need to download that information from the stakeholders and then play it back to them and then work through it, refine it, mold it. Use your SMEs, the SMEs in that business are the people that founded the business, the people that started it in the first place. But also strategy isn't a word that the previous, the people that I'd experienced in my previous company, management consultants, sorry if there's any in here, I've really gone in on you. That's just a word that people use to bamboozle everyone else, to make them feel smart. Strategy is all of our responsibility. So I'd like to think I'd sort of use the people above that strategy and validate it and refine it, but also then empower people in development teams, QA, UX, anyone involved in the process is involved in strategy, through just excellence and competence of refinement, planning, execution, delivery, measurement, instrumentation. Like we're all involved in it. So that's what I learned there. It's genuinely a team sport. And also roadmap isn't the strategy. I'm not going to go into that. Martin Dahlman, I think I've pronounced his name right, has got lots of interesting pieces on that. And then the last part, I probably won't dwell on this too much because it's probably quite self-explanatory, is as a sort of leader, a team leader, sort of someone trying to get to that top table and represent product on a sort of proper business level, I need to own the numbers. And I'd never really spent the time doing that before. And my takeaway here is, well, spend the time doing it. Actually carve time out of your own calendar, carve time out of my own diary and my routine to go mine for those numbers, make them part of my daily routine, and actually start to think beyond product, because then I can have that influence on the broader business, the broader stakeholders, the leaders, the people in charge of the funds. And actually that was something that really took me a while to understand, is that employees working in cybersecurity, ever-changing space. And right now, we've got this big vision that we're trying to work towards. And product's role in that is to play this bridgecraft role. Like, how do we go from this big vision and actually join that everyone uses every day for work in many interactions? So we need to really drill down into sort of the customer experience side. So I'm calling in bits of my experience here to try and understand what type of product person I need to be in my current role. But it's a work in progress, and that's fine because the things that impact product managers, the things that impact how we work, the things that impact how successful we are, we can't always control. It can be the personalities involved, the decision-making processes. It can be the legacy tech, and sometimes even the people that built the legacy tech. So it's a work in progress. Have to call on those experiences and adapt, and that's part of what makes product fun. So takeaways. So that's it. Those are my learnings, my takeaways. Look how small that is. If anyone can read that. Yeah, those are my contacts, Max Cowley. That's wrong. I'll be actually Max Cowley Beedman on LinkedIn. But if anyone's got any questions, then feel free.
Any questions?
Not product related, but you said that, or you implied that you'd moved from like a leadership, more leadership role, leader role, sorry, to an individual contributor.
Yeah.
Have you done that earlier in your career, and how do you sell that as not a negative when you go?
Repeat the question for. What? Can you repeat the question yourself? Sorry, I didn't want to butcher it.
How do you put a positive spin on moving out of a leadership role and into a individual contributor?
Okay, so how do I put a positive spin on leadership into individual contributor? That's a really good question. And actually, I did wonder whether I made the right move doing that. But scale of organisation. So even though my current place is quite founder-led, it is a much larger organisation with a larger reach. When I talk about owning the numbers, we're talking about owning a larger scale of revenue, customers, end users, and that to me really helps me build a profile of impact. Sometimes I do regret moving from a leadership role, but I'll always have that experience. That's part of who I am. I'm never going to lose that. So I can't actually answer the question. There's no template of how you do that, but as long as you're learning, growing, and actually you can legitimately put your product experiences down on paper without having to force or fudge anything, then that would be my advice.
Any tips? Be a team player at a strategy level.
Team player at a strategy level. My experience is one file. We had quite a few people who were moving up into like leading functions like engineering, QA, product. So we sort of agreed informally that we'd do that together and learn together. So we actually sort of worked as a bit of a tribe to actually do that. We were going on that same journey. So if you can find people with similar sort of objectives and goals, that's a great way of doing it.
Did you have any sort of people who were very senior or very experienced level that you had to kind of integrate with as well?
We did. I mean, the founder and the CTO were obviously much more senior than us. Founder was really, really flexible and very understanding and didn't come from a tech background. So we had that sort of breathing space to sort of not show off, but to grow into. Whereas with our CTO, had a lot more technical knowledge in the industry and within just being a CTO. We did have to toe the line there because that's the nature of that relationship. Yep.
You said you're obsessed with products, you're a product nerd. Hello. What are you currently obsessed with?
What am I currently obsessed with? Oh, that's a good question. Probably understanding a bit more about. Well, yeah, a bit more about the UX discovery process. That might seem a bit obvious, but in some of my other roles, like I haven't had that chance to really understand what good discovery looks like. We've done it through muddling forward or sort of speaking to customers in a very ad hoc way. So at the moment, it's just trying to understand what great discovery in UX looks like, because my experience has been very just get into the weeds of things, learn by doing, which is great because I can say I've done a lot of things and I've learned from them. But actually, I've never really done great product discovery. So actually learning a bit more about that and rounding that whole sort of piece off, probably. Yeah.
Your career sounds to me that you learn a lot of hard skills that you can learn anywhere. But what is the most important soft skill that you pick up to say this one was critical for product people to get next step in their career?
I mean, to sort of chime with the theme of it, it's like how would you connect with people early on and build credibility? And so I'll give you an example. So with engineering, right, and you move into a new job or a new role, you've always got to assume that on your first day, you might be in a sprint, meeting of some description or a team. You don't know what you're going to get asked to do, but you need to go and help them. Write some documentation, test a bug, and to build credibility with that engineering team. But then when you're moving out into those different areas, let's say, with some leadership or management, sit down with them, like go and speak to them, like invest time in actually going and speaking to them and understanding like what their motivations are, what their business priorities are. Because ultimately, at some point, whether it's the next week, the next month, the next quarter, next year, it will come back and pay off. And investing time with key stakeholders or just people in the business who are smart, it always pays off. I've never regretted doing that. Going and speaking with people and putting one-to-one FaceTime in. And if they're really important, influential people, put a one-to-one in every 2 weeks. And you can download information, you can shortcut key bits of intel, relative thing, has to deliver continuously. So I'd say the project side of it.
But that's like the whole Scrum Master, like PMO thing, falling to product people is, you guys tend to be the really organised ones because you have to like refine your backlogs and have all the user stories and have thought all of that up front, and so people look to you to problem solve when actually, you need to invest better in that delivery layer to make sure that it's not a burden you have to carry.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not easy, right? Because like try and go tell your business, yeah, we've got 4 teams and so I need to hire 4 Scrum Masters.
Maybe, in different places you've worked and where you currently are, it's like it's lacking, and like if so, why?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like if there's a scale of what the discipline of UX looks like in the place I've worked, in some areas it's been very full coverage, like actual discovery, product design, working with PMs on a daily basis, to just being a synonym for, or a euphemism for just UI design and everything in between. I think it's because, well, I don't know why that sort of ambiguity or that sliding scale exists, but it's probably just understanding. And how maybe UX even report in, who does the head of UX, who should the head of UX report into? Should it be head of product? Should it be head of something else? These are rhetorical, existential questions I don't know the answer to. But for me, like not having a place for those teams in the organization can cause that ambiguity and actually undervalue what UX does. And in my current role, we have a good, strong understanding of how product and UX need to come to, well, we're one team. And that's the experience I've had here in my current role is the best compared to previous roles, because there is that definition. It fits into what we're trying to do. Any more?
I don't know. Would you rather have a business analyst and a project manager working on the same project, because the two are actually married to one another, according to me? So, or would you rather have a project manager and a business analyst, which is one person now, and how does that have affected productivity?
You're probably asking the wrong person. I know that's a terrible, terrible thing to say. One of the jobs I had, which wasn't reflected on here, I'll answer that through some experiences. There's a big scope of, like a big migration project with like 20 teams. And the product people needed to be project managers. There was product owners, product managers, and BAs. The BAs did all of the valuable work. So it depends on what the program of work is. So in that instance, it was great to have the BAs, and I even joked to my manager, you can sack me, you don't need me. You've got the BAs and you've got the people setting the strategic direction. I'm just sitting in the middle, picking up a living. So it depends on the business scenario. I can't answer that. Cool. Anyone else? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, mate.
Right, thank you very much to our 4 speakers tonight. Lydia, Tim, Lauren and Max. Appreciate you all giving me your time up to do this and travelling in far and wide and obviously writing everything. Now, promoting the next event, which will be in July, early July. There'll be another event. So If you want to get signed up, get scanned onto that QR code. No? 2 months in advance, yeah. So as before, we'll start drip feeding the speakers out, but it'll probably be here again. So yeah, and as well, any feedback either tonight or over the next few days would be appreciated. Hopefully you guys in product would appreciate the concept of feedback loops. So yeah, thanks very much for everyone that's come down tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we're all going to the pub now. So.